Take it there, who gon' take it there, who gon' take it there, who gon' take it there? Electricity, 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 electricity. You know what's in the air, you know what's in the air, you know what's in the air, you know what's in the air. It's possibility, it's possibility, it's possibility, it's possibility.
So that Jubilee channel that does all kinds of silly debates and ridiculous things like children debating their parents and black people debating white people and all kinds of fun, healthy discourse content like that. They have this segment called Surrounded, which is one person who holds a certain political belief surrounded by 20 people that hold the opposite belief, and they debate it out one at a time. They have a whole format for it. It's an amusing concept for a show. I find that it starts to run a little dry pretty quickly. It really, I guess, just depends on what kind of conversation is happening. The Jubilee channel tends to be focused on like culture war type of stuff. It seems like whoever's funding it, whoever created it, that's their goal, is to prop up certain culture war conversations like, you know, LGBTQ plus versus black people and stuff like that. You know, that's sort of the brand. But I will say that it's relatively, I don't know if balanced is the right word, but they use different perspectives in their content, and they highlight different perspectives in their content as a way to kind of keep this churn of discourse going. So initially it was conservatives. I think the first one of these videos was Charlie Kirk debating a bunch of progressives or liberals or whatever it was. And I mean, that says a lot to me in terms of, again, the creators of this program and what exactly the intent of this program is. If the first person that you land on for this show is Charlie Kirk, clearly there's some kind of relationship behind the scenes there, or that suits your vision of what this show should be, and also like what a talented debater is and a talented thinker is, right? The first person on the conservative side you go for is Charlie Kirk, who is a Christian nationalist spokesperson, but he also kind of comes from like the college conservative circuit, so I suspect that is the kind of world that this program is coming from. But ever since the Charlie Kirk episode, they've had different commentators on there. They've had a couple left-wing guys on there, mostly young people. There was this one kid, I can't remember which one it is, but he's a progressive commentator. I'll put his channel up on the video so people can see, because he did a pretty good job, but he's young, you know what I mean? So they had this like whatever 19, 20-year-old kid, however old he is, debating a bunch of people. He held his own, but the comparison between a kid like that and Charlie Kirk debating was, even though I think they would both be evenly matched in terms of like debate skills, you know, one is just younger. So it's like the pool of people that they were picking from was interesting to me. And then they have all these random people that are sitting in the circle surrounding. But with the choice of Sam Seder to host this recent episode, it seems like, again, they're at least trying to show some balance, show some proclivity towards highlighting progressives as well. And I mean, Sam was a good choice because Sam is experienced. He's been talking publicly about this stuff for a long time. It's very information based. And so while that you can quibble about the facts and what he has right and what he has wrong, which plenty of that happens in this debate, you know, he at least comes from like a long line of experience of talking about this set of facts. And so that is maybe slightly less entertaining, but more valuable, right? Like that's the type of person who in this type of context can really hold their own against debating all of these different people from all different angles, especially Sam, because Sam has made a habit of debating throughout his career. It's one of the things that he likes to do. And so overall, I mean, it was a pretty good episode. Like I said, it kind of wears thin on me pretty fast. Not this episode in particular, but in general, this format, I think it's cuter in concept than it is in practice. But there's great moments that come out of it, and that's pretty much what it's for. So I want to highlight a couple of these moments to show what debate tactics Sam was using that was working, maybe some of the points of weakness that other people were able to find in his arguments, but also there's kind of a lack of even footing in terms of like where people are coming from in these debates. That's the number one thing being highlighted. That's why it kind of doesn't work, because you have Sam debating people from a policy perspective. That's what his claims are that are being debated. And then you have all these young people who are more interested in culture war stuff, and that's just more the angle that they're coming from. And so again, it leads to some interesting moments, but not that much can be discerned from their disagreements, I don't think. But we'll get started with first clip. I don't want to highlight too much of these folks just like looking dumb, because there were moments like that, but you know, there were a few of them that did all right. And I just think this is rhetorical. It's just rhetorical practice, which has some value, but we'll go through some of it.
She didn't go through a single primary, none of these things.
So you're saying that Kamala was the vice president of the United States after the president drops out 2 months before the convention. You think that's a DEI
She wasn't
hire?
Every presidential nominee is democratically selected to be the nominee for that party,
Do you realize
except
there were
for
not
Kamala
even
Harris.
primaries prior to 1972
Well,
in
sure,
the Democratic
but
Party?
this isn't before 1972.
Well, I understand, but what did you think you were going to run primaries in those 2 months?
Well,
I mean,
sure,
Joe Biden should have dropped out
even
3 years
even
ago, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, sure, but even before, when Kamala was running in primaries, she wasn't the next man up. None of this. She wasn't the next person.
Well, she
up.
was the vice president,
right? Of course, but
yeah.
she wasn't
that
in
tiny
primaries.
Detail. But
right,
listen,
well,
aside from, I would have might have wanted a different candidate as well. But that has nothing to do with Trump rescinding orders that basically say you need to search for a wide range of candidates, not necessarily give any different benefits, but you need to make sure different communities have access to the awareness of this job. You need in your office accessibility for people who have physical handicaps.
Sure.
If you have folks who identify as as trans, you need to make it at least hospitable and not. This is all non-discriminatory stuff.
So this is a great moment where the point that the kid is making here is that Kamala Harris being selected for the presidency is an example of DEI. She essentially making the case that she was a DEI hire. And the thing that I'm highlighting here that I think Sam does really well is that that's completely ancillary to the point. The point here, that the broad point that's being made, is that Sam is saying the DEI, Trump's attacks on DEI are just a ploy to give corporations more power. That's the point that's the point Sam is making. So he's talking about corporations and how the attacks on DEI are not what they appear to be. This kid is this was probably one of the weaker debaters of this. And he is saying that, using Kamala Harris as an example of DEI, and I guess just how Democrats govern that way. But Sam points out a very important thing that almost everybody misses when they make that point, which is that people say, Kamala Harris wasn't democratically elected and she wasn't, she wasn't selected by any voters, which is true in the sense of a primary, which they address here. There was no primary, and there should have been a primary. Joe Biden should have dropped out, because that's the only way. They weren't going to hold a primary last minute. So that was the disaster, is that Biden held out for too long and then was forced out. But the fact that Kamala Harris was the person who got the nomination after that she was more democratically elected than anybody else on the field. That is a point that everybody deliberately misses, because they want to make the point that, Kamala Harris isn't fit for office. She's a woman. People don't like her. And to an extent, that's true. She has never run any very successful campaigns other than for district attorney in California. But when it comes to national politics, she does not have a good track record. However, she was on the ticket. She was a democratically elected vice president. That's exactly what the vice president is there for. So not only the fact that Sam points that out, but the fact that he points that out and then quickly moves back to the point is, I think, an example of how much more adept Sam is at this than a lot of the other people that they've had do it. And this is kind of the level that a guy like Charlie Kirk or Michael Knowles, who they have also had on this program, that's kind of the level that they're able to operate at. They talk fast. So even if their facts are wrong or whatever, it's like they're able to quickly make a point and move on and sort of control the conversation rhetorically. And that's what you have to be able to do in order to play this game specifically. So that was the first moment where I felt like Sam was making it clear what type of skill set he has in these type of debates, and I think it serves him well.
Something I found interesting too in that clip was the two people that Sam was talking with. Both seem to acknowledge that DEI in general comes from a good place, that we need DEIA programs, that especially that accessibility, making sure people have a fair chance, having safeguards in place to ensure that is a good thing. They were saying that it had been abused though. And I find it odd and telling that you think if a system that is good is being abused, you just throw the whole thing out rather than work on reforming the system, fixing the flaws in it, making it be whatever the original goals of said system were. But I think Sam did a really good job of sticking to his guns, staying on topic, staying focused on the right things. His priorities were right, and he was able to loop things back around. He was definitely a good choice for this. I certainly agree with you on that. And the whole thing is a weird setup, but if you're going to have someone doing it, I guess he is a good person for that. So this will be interesting to see the rest of this here.
So I want a little bit more clarification, because I don't even know if we got it yet, on which part benefits corporations, like from your perspective.
So agencies, the U.S. government agencies, the vast majority of them, what they function to do is inhibit corporations from essentially externalizing their costs onto society.
Sure.
So the example would be, I used it before, but it's a good one. I'm making Teflon, C8, for instance, okay? And C8 is supposed to be burned because instead of deposited, because it's a forever chemical. And I can go out and instead of burning it, it's too expensive to burn it, I'm gonna dump it into a river. And the EPA comes in and says, you can't do that. We're gonna fine you. You're not allowed to do this. But what the company is doing when they do that is they're gonna take the profits that come with lowering their costs by dumping it into the river. And those costs are then borne by everybody who lives around that river. They're gonna get cancer, they're gonna get gastrointestinal problems, whatever it is. And society bears the cost of that.
Can you connect the dots for me though? Because it sounds like we're talking about something completely different.
And so the DEIA stuff is just the beginning of demoralizing these agencies and trying to wreck them from the inside. It's all part of Russell Vought's thing, the OMB, the whole Schedule F, where they get rid of civil servants and they demoralize people and they don't want them to be able to function.
So then would you agree, if this is about demoralizing, I mean, over 75 million people voted for Trump, right? He won the popular vote. Do you not think that in part, you even said yourself that Americans don't really know what DEIA is, according to your definition of it?
Well, the government's definition of it.
Okay, well, I would argue that the average American is demoralized by what they've seen, the way that the government goes about their DEI policies and the military and other organizations, not just the military.
Please return to your seat.
Okay.
So this clip is a great example of how a lot of these people here, and I assume some of the people that were sitting around in the circle that we didn't hear from, were very much more culture war focused, and Sam was a little bit more policy focused, which he mentioned at the end. And, I guess that could go different ways, because if you're more policy focused, it's a little bit more dry. You could definitely accuse the Majority Report of being a little dry sometimes, but that's because they dig really deep into the policy. And so his positions on policy are pretty well informed. And again, you can quibble about the facts, but at least it's coming from pretty firmly rooted information, pretty specific stuff. Whereas a lot of the propaganda that young conservatives of all stripes are listening to is very culture oriented. It's about how people feel. It's about how the country feels. It's about why Donald Trump is so inspiring, or why people are so angry and they want Donald Trump. And you really see that in this guy's response, because he says, tell me what it is that you think benefits corporations about attacking DEI, or something to that effect. And Sam talks about this idea of externalizing the costs. And it's the way he lays it out, this specific example, you kind of can't name something more American than that example that he gave. There's something that is like quintessentially small town America about that example. A factory supposed to get rid of these chemicals. This is some corporate conglomerate or whatever that exists in a small town. They want to dispose of their chemicals by dumping them in the river, and that affects the local population. So this is a storied example of something that has happened countless times throughout America, and it's the reason that we have these type of regulations. But a lot of these conservatives are simply not familiar with that framework of looking at how government operates and what government is doing. And so there's some validity to saying, hey, this is crooked, or there's waste or whatever, especially if you have specific things to point to. But in general, when people are anti-regulation, when people are insisting that the government is increasing inflation with regulations or something like that, or inhibiting freedom of the average American, it's because they are inundated with propaganda about the feelings associated with regulation and government, feeling constrained by government, feeling like the government is increasing costs because they want to give handouts to poor people or whatever. And so that's just the perspective that a lot of these people are coming from. And so in his follow-up, he says, do you not think that people are demoralized by what they see from the government? Incredibly vague. You couldn't have more vague language than that. And to be fair, I mean, this guy, maybe he just wasn't articulating his point as well as he could have or wanted to. But the point is, he pushed for clarification from Sam on like what his opinion on corporations are or whatever. And Sam had a really specific answer. And this guy was not able to contend with that. It just didn't, you could actively see that the specifics of Sam's example kind of threw a wrench in this guy's worldview, his ability to articulate his worldview. So, not sure exactly what the implications of that are, but it's the kind of stark contrast you see because of this format, and when you get a really well-informed and practiced debater hosting a show like this, especially amongst, younger people, this generation of young conservatives that a lot of them just don't know what the fuck they're talking about. And some of them do. There are some of these people here that are like more economics based, and so they're at least their perspective is coming from an informational basis. But you definitely see a lot of this culture war stuff, and that's the last clip that I want to highlight here in a second.
So we can disagree on this. I don't want to live in a country that is ruled by religious fundamentalism.
And if I do, you have no issue with that.
And no. And this is why I say, under Trump, yes, you have won.
Yes.
You have a
Only
bunch
male
of Christian.
and female. You're right.
You have a Christian nationalist,
yes.
and
which is necessary.
And so I concede the point that under Trump, your Christian nationalism has gained an advantage under this.
Sorry, we're going to have more kids. We're going to have less abortions. We're going to have more family. We're going to have stable family households. Sorry about better education.
People, gay people should be outlawed.
They should be straight. They should be straight.
Women should be secondary to their husbands.
Women should submit to the husbands.
Women
that doesn't mean they are
husbands.
slaves.
Right,
it doesn't mean they are slaves. It means they are protected. Okay, let me ask you.
No.
Should women be drafted? Should women be drafted?
Listen, I think
if they're equal, should they be drafted?
I think this is the vision that you have, and I think Trump supports it.
Yes.
I think the Christian nationalists he has throughout his government are all going to work towards your vision.
Yes.
And my hope is that when people look at this, they say, hey, wait a second. I don't want my life to be dictated by the notion of a Christian nationalist prescription. Now, you may win out. I mean, certainly, like if you look at a country like Iran, they have a theocracy there, and apparently that's, good for them.
So this last clip, and this is, by no means like the end of this program or, even there were a lot of moments here that I didn't highlight. Honestly, I recommend everybody go watch the whole thing, because even though you will be exposed to some distasteful conservative beliefs like this last fellow, like I said, Sam holds his own very well. He's a very good debater. So there aren't that many people that you would want communicating the counterpoint to some of these ideas. However, this last clip is an example of the fact that Sam and these people are having different conversations. And that's something we already kind of know about the political situation in America. It's not that surprising, but there is something stark about it. And there's a difference between this young guy and maybe the person in the last clip, or some of these other debaters who were a little bit more policy oriented, or at least had like a firm policy basis for why they were conservative. Whereas from this guy, and there was this other girl who I believe was featured in the promo, who was saying that she thinks xenophobic nationalism is good for America. And so these are people who are they're fundamentalist. They are, in her words, xenophobic. And that is just what they believe is right and good. And so what's good about this last clip here is not that Sam refutes this guy's argument effectively, because I don't think he does. But what he does is he uses this guy as an example of exactly what Trump's priorities and beliefs are. And the point that Sam is making, the point that they are all contending with in this round, is that the only people who are really getting what they wanted out of Trump are xenophobic nationalists, billionaires, and religious fundamentalists. And so most of the people who responded to that were actually defending Trump from a religious fundamentalist or xenophobic nationalist perspective, and not the idea that, the average person is who's benefiting from Trump's policies. And so that's very telling. And Sam, in his sort of irreverence, he is able to bypass the temptation to engage directly with this guy's pretty despicable worldview. This dude has no concept of the fact that other people should not have to live by the doctrine of his God. And that is 100% what we're dealing with in these religious fundamentalists. And I don't think they represent any type of majority. I think they have, definitely outsized power. And this guy stating plainly what he believes, and Sam saying, well, you are 100% aligned with Donald Trump then, and him saying, yes, that's great. There's a wedge there. That's what I want everybody to understand. There's a wedge there. There are definitely Trump supporters in this very circle of conservatives that do not share this guy's worldview and are probably a little bit repulsed by it. And so while I think that there's going to be a little bit of a tolerance for that type of diversity of thought in the conservative movement for now, I don't think that's going to hold up. And these wedges need to be pushed further. And the best thing you could do in this situation is show people, display for people that the guys who believe what this young man believes in terms of Christian fundamentalism are the ones in the driver's seat. And their beliefs about how our society should be shaped is at the core of the Trump movement. And the more and more Trump voters or just disaffected people that we can convince to that effect, one of the most powerful rebellious forces in our society is rebellion against religious fundamentalism. And that form of rebellion has fallen away because the religious fundamentalists have not been in power in the same way as they were historically in America over the last hundreds of years or so. And so now that power is shifting back again, and those people are trying to scratch and claw their way back in power, and they have to a large extent. And there's a lot of people in this country who are disgusted by the type of rhetoric that this guy's spitting out. And there's a lot of people who have warmed up to this type of rhetoric as well. But, making people like him the spokesperson for the Trump movement is exactly what the more sensible people on the conservative side of the spectrum do not want. They recognize that that's bad for their movement, for people like this to speak for them. So, that's what we should highlight, because despite the fact that there is disagreement amongst conservatives about things like that, the point remains that, people who believe what this guy believes are in the driver's seat, and their beliefs and their emotions are the animating force behind the conservative movement. And as many young conservatives and kind of like contrarian conservatives as possible need to be convinced of that fact. But beyond that, this was a good program. I'm not sure if it was all that beneficial. I used to watch a lot more debate content. I enjoy watching Sam Seder debate and people who are talented at debates, but really what it is catharsis. It's catharsis on either side, and a good debate is a debate where both sides got their shots in and made the other side look stupid in a couple moments. And that's really all it is. It's rhetorical tricks and tactics. And so while I don't think that much comes out of like individual persuasion, trying to persuade people, I do think that there is something to be said for the fact that some of these moments of confusion, right? It's not so much the epic dunks or the moment where someone says, I never thought about it like that. But the moments of confusion and chaos in these conversations, I think might actually be the key to some kind of progress, because it kind of has to be. It's like when you really crack these disagreements between people open, you get this weird sense where both people are grappling with the fact that they're not having the same conversation. They're not speaking the same language, so to speak. And I think that while it might not happen in the moment, moments like that are where real growth comes out of. Because whether somebody has some kind of demented conservative beliefs or so-called moderate conservative beliefs or left-wing beliefs or whatever, most people are trying to figure it out. Some people are more stubborn than others when it comes to self-reflection. But for the most part, if someone feels like their point's not getting across and they're talking to another human, not another brick wall or another antagonist, that they don't care if there's an agreement there. But Sam, I think, comes off as very human and likable in this debate setting, which is, good, not in the sense of like appealing to these conservatives' humanity, but it makes it harder to dismiss the fact that you're just completely on a different planet from the person that you're talking to. And I think there's something there. There's an opportunity there in those moments, because as I've said before, just because somebody reacts negatively to something you say, just because somebody doesn't admit that they were persuaded on the spot, doesn't mean that you didn't get through to them. And in fact, a lot of times people react the most negatively when you have said something that struck a nerve or something that got through to them. And so that's important to keep in mind in these conversations. I'm not saying we should wade out and go debating everybody that we can, but it's not a bad time. It's not a bad time to be, to have good information on our side and to be really, really good at debating and communicating those ideas. It's a good time to sharpen up on those qualities, because the tide is going to turn and these conversations are going to come back around the other way. And hopefully some of these people are able to recognize that like the morality that they are preaching about does not align with some of, these more psychotic elements of the right wing.
Yeah, I feel like debates like this really are only performative. I believe that people believe what they're saying, but in the sense that they really only serve to prop up as examples to people to point out how right their side is or how wrong the other side is, easily making fun of people having bad opinions or uninformed opinions. At the very least, I do think it's good, though, for people who don't know much about these kind of issues, who maybe not are on the fence but are just completely uninformed, to watch these and get a feel for which side is which and what each side stands for. And like you were saying, I like that these fundamentalists are getting louder and louder in Trump's camp so people can see that's what he's breeding. That's the kind of behavior he's allowing. So, or not even allowing, but profiting from directly and encouraging. And it does really serve to show how scary, bigoted a lot of these people are. I growing up in the 90s, that was the era of, we ended racism. Racism's over. I didn't realize how big of a problem it was till I moved away from my small town, till people like W came into power. Things like seeing the open hatred towards Muslim people after 9/11, stuff like that made me really realize how strong it is. But even I was still guilty of thinking of it as something more from a bygone era, or something that's a problem, like out and out misogyny, open ball-faced misogyny and racism and stuff was a problem with the older generations. Yeah, it's still around, but that's the old people that are stuck in their ways. As they die off, it'll go away. And it wasn't until Charlottesville that I realized how popular it was among the youth. And then in these last 10 years, have seen it just grow and grow and grow. And like this is always a reminder, like I kept expecting, because the crowd of the 20 was so many young people, I kept expecting as whoever was actively debating Sam Seder in the moment, I kept expecting them to get voted off real quick and someone to come and be like, well, that guy doesn't represent all of us, but here's why you're wrong, Sam. And, but it wasn't happening. I mean, people were getting voted, out of the debate, and other people were coming up that were just as or even more horrible. So, it's always a nice reminder to see what we're up against and show the world exactly how disgusting that side can be.
If you like this video, please like and subscribe. And if you really want to support, consider becoming a member. That's the best way to support me. I'll be posting all kinds of stuff there, exclusive podcasts, songs, beats. If you like the beats that play in the back of this podcast, all that's going to be posted there, and other stuff. If there's stuff you'd like to see as exclusive content, just let me know and we'll figure some things out.